If you are interested in starting your own podcast, we use Buzzsprout because it is simple and easy to use. Buzzsprout can get your show listed on every major platform while giving you the resources for a great podcast website, audio players that can drop into other websites, detailed analytics to see how people are listening to your podcast, and tools to promote your episodes. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and that is why over 100,000 podcasters are already subscribed to Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Following the link in our episode descriptions lets Buzzsprout know that we sent you. So in return, you will receive a $20 Amazon gift card from Buzzsprout while signing up for a paid plan. Most importantly, every subscription through our link is always appreciated and helps support our show so we can continue delivering the quality content that you guys listen to. That being said, back to the show.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Junkies. I'm Andrew.
This is Joe.
And this time we're coming at you with our review and recap of Marvels, the miniseries written back in the day with Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross. It was actually one of Ross's earlier works. If you've listened to our Kingdom Come episode, he also worked on that. Kind of a similar vibe, not quite the same thing, but, for DC, a little bit after the fact, after this came out. If you're familiar at all with Alex Ross, it's more of like the painted art style. He doesn't really do a lot of interiors and stuff like that. Usually he's reserved more for covers. So, reading something like that, I'm personally a big fan. So, being able to read one of the books in which he does interiors was big for me. What are your preliminary thoughts on the book, Joe? How you doing?
I actually think I took more notes on how I felt about the book than the book itself. So I'll reserve those for the review at the end, but I enjoyed it. It's 4.5 issues. The reason I say that is it's 4 issues with a 0 issue at the beginning. That kind of gives like a little introduction to what we should anticipate for those 4 main issues. Do you want to just get right into it?
Sure, we could start off at the 0 issue. The whole thing is basically recounting Jim Hammond, the original Human Torch, kind of recounting his Frankenstein origin story more so. And, him and, what's his name? Mr. Horton. He was made by Dr. Horton. So it's, it's got strong Frankenstein parallels from the get-go. But it kind of, leads you into the advent of superheroes and kind of brings you a little taste of what to expect with the coming issues.
Not only is it big Frankenstein vibes, but it even starts off with a cool quote from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So big respect. In the same way that Frankenstein's viewed as a monster, this whole story is about how even superheroes are viewed as monsters. And so definitely some really cool parallels there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, the Human Torch is basically considered like a menace, basically off rip. So he gets created, nothing he asked for. He kind of just wants to see the outside world, but they basically lock him in a stone tomb until he could either be used or he could be helped. He didn't know either. But basically he spent his whole time down there just learning everything about the outside world while never getting to actually experience it for himself due to he wasn't able to control his powers when they did the demo of, how he works. So basically anytime Homeboy's in oxygen, he just lights up. But all he wanted to be was like an equal. And then one day he got his wish. And there's a crack in the stone tomb, let the oxygen in, and obviously he lit up and escaped. And, it kind of is like a preface that his arrival won't be the last of the fantastic beings. So pretty cool prelude.
Yeah, especially because Human Torch is one of the original Marvel characters. And I thought it was hilarious that there was an opportunity for him to be equals or whatever, but the science community was not excited about Dr. Horton's creation when he showed him off. And I thought it was hilarious that he was same thing as Victor Frankenstein, half in and half out. He gave the Human Torch a book on tape while he was completely cemented. And he got quite the education down there until he finally broke out one day. But anyways, yeah, very cool introduction of the origin of Marvel, I guess, and also the beginning of what we're going to focus on for the majority of the story, which is a photographer named Phil, who I believe is going to make, this is his first introduction to what he coins as the Marvels.
Yeah, and we meet him. It's back in 1939 New York. We also meet one of his buddies, young J. Jonah Jameson, which I thought was cool. He already had aspirations to run the Bugle at that point. But yeah, like you said, Phil Sheldon, he was there to witness the Human Torch's powers for the first time. He was at the press conference, just as a bystander, and he couldn't basically believe what he was seeing. But he's with Doris, which is his girlfriend at the time, and they're out on the street. They hear screaming. Everyone's going running to go, he's going running towards it, which most people are running away because, he loves to get pics of all that action. And he does see the torch before he ends up flying away. So, I mean, not long after that, it's not just the torch. Doris witnessed Namor for the first time. He had super strength, couldn't be hurt by bullets. And obviously, this is something that people in the 30s were not capable of, being bulletproof and super strength. But so everyone's like, whoa, what the hell? And more and more Marvels, as he puts it, kind of keep showing up out of the like woodworks all of a sudden. And that kind of makes him scared.
Yeah, no, I like that it was 1939 too, because that was probably the actual
Yeah.
introduction of the Human Torch. So, but that leads us to book one. They kind of bleed into each other that way, I guess, because at the beginning, he can't quite shake off what he experienced because there's something that finally exists in this world that's more than human. It's shortly after that that we learn about the Submariner as well. And Phil, he's so threatened by the Marvels that he feels it makes him less of a man. And he actually decides to call off his engagement with his soon-to-be wife because he feels like he can't be a provider or take care of her in a situation where a Marvel would show up, which is kind of weird thing to think about that you can't like get married knowing that there's these like superpowered beings out there. And it's kind of interesting to see how his feelings towards these Marvels kind of change over the next four issues.
Most people kind of feel the same way as Phil. They're kind of annoyed with how power has kind of left the people because, I mean, they were just in the middle of the war. They had a lot to focus on. They felt like they were doing something. And then all of a sudden, like superhuman people just start showing up. But at the same time, people are torn because they're not only like fearful of all these superheroes showing up, but they're also like really enjoying the story. Like they care more about that than the war at this point, which is kind of wild. But, they witness them fight, which is what brings a lot of this fear to them, is that there's nothing they can do to stop when superheroes fight. There's nothing they can do. It's completely out of their hands. They're completely at the mercy of whatever these beings decide to do. And they're just, left to pick up the pieces. So people are kind of uneasy about it, but that's until Captain America shows up, and everyone loves Captain America. They get behind him. He's destroying Nazi like battalions on his own and like flipping tanks, and everyone's like, hell yeah, he fights for us, which would rule. But you even see like young Nick Fury at that point, which I love all the like references and kind of like little things they slip in that sometimes they circle back to, but not necessarily the whole time. But it's just cool. It's got a lot of Easter eggs. If you're a big Marvel fan, you can pretty much all through the Silver Age and stuff like that kind of pick up on little things. But like I said, Phil left Doris in earlier in the issue, and she's at the movie with some dork, and he's just like, oh, what the hell? But he goes and sits down, and before that they have a newsreel which shows the Human Torch and the Submariner fighting Nazis and the Japanese, and everyone was all about it, especially seeing those two fight together because Namor throughout this book always is invading New York depending on the day. So it's everyone's like, oh cool, he's doing something cool.
The people
Yeah.
start to like rally around. I think it starts with Captain America, but then they start to grow fond of like the Human Torch and Submariner. But to your point, there's moments where Submariner has brief changes of heart and like attacks New York. But instead of being paralyzed by fear, Phil finally grabs his camera and confronts the action. Unfortunately, he gets so close to the action that he's hit by a brick and loses an eyeball.
Whoa.
But he wakes up to find that the Submariner is still one of the good guys, and he's got this new sense of security and confidence because he finally overcame his fear of the Marvels, which is interesting because and good because the world is just starting to amp up on even more superheroes at this point.
Yeah, and not to mention getting like bricked right in the eye. He gets his chick back too.
Yeah. After he loses his eye, he's like, "Do you want to go back with me?"
She's like, "Oh, okay."
He's dumb enough to say yes.
Yeah, dude, instant eye patch and like dealing with this guy for the rest of like his life. The fucking eye patch photographer who fucking ditches his family for to go take pictures of superheroes the whole book.
Constantly, like especially from book 2 to 4, like they're like, do you want to play Monopolies? Like, actually, I want to take more pictures, and constantly ditching them for like action, or like when the world's falling apart, instead of wanting to be with his family for those last moments, he's just like, grab my camera. So
I gotta sell this to the newspaper.
which is
Like,
a,
bro, they won't be there tomorrow.
and it
Guy's got his
always does
priorities straight.
though. So I guess the Marvels kind of keep him with a good job, I guess.
Definitely. But moving out of that, we're heading into book 2, where there's a little bit of a time skip. It's the 60s now, Phil's a little bit older. The Avengers are a thing, the Fantastic Four, Thor, all them. And I put a little note here because I don't recall exactly what it was that made me like so pumped, but I was like, the art rules. I don't know what it is about me and my lizard brain, but I like the painted look. Like it looks very realistic, but it's also very Silver Agey. I mean, obviously it is. It takes place during that era, but I don't know. I thought that it ruled. And it's got to be kind of cool to be a superhero photographer. I mean, it's got to be like very difficult and dangerous, but I mean, that's got to be cool kind of chasing superheroes around just like doing that. If I was a photographer in that universe, I probably wouldn't want to shoot other stuff. But he pretty much puts it as, now that he's got like this kind of older, more refined philosophy on things and, just a sheer amount of Marvels, he considers it like life or death, but it's like the greatest show on earth. And that's basically how everyone's living because everyone's kind of just like an active participant in these superhero stories, whether they like it or not. But at the same time, it's very exciting. I mean, there's never a dull moment. So that's got to be pretty spooky. I was talking to Jazz about that just the other day, actually. I was like, could you imagine just like we live in Michigan, so like we probably would be unaffected other than like cosmic level, like Galactus coming to eat the Earth type stuff. But like everyone's in Manhattan and like New York in general, and they got to deal with all the like BS. Most people in the Midwest are just chilling in the Marvel universe, it seems.
They did make a few references to Detroit though, as places for like manufacturing and like
Yeah, Tony Stark.
Tony
Stark
Stark
Industries
stuff.
had a thing there. But Phil comes up with the idea to dub it the Marvels and he wants to get the bag by like selling like a book, a photo book, really, to people who are interested, which people in like New York are obviously they see them all the time and they still get excited. But he's like, could you imagine somebody in like Peoria or like, in the Midwest? Which I thought was like legit because I mean if nothing that exciting happens in the Midwest. So it would be pretty tight to get that and be like, whoa, New York's got all these crazy people.
When he pitches the book to the publisher's like, is Isaac Asimov gonna write it? So there are some pretty funny jokes throughout this too. And other sci-fi writers, but ultimately they do agree to move forward with Phil's idea of making a book full of his pictures. And as long as he can prove that he's a good enough writer to back it as well. And so I guess later that night, he has his first encounter with the X-Men, and more so his first encounter with mutants. So unlike the Marvels, they actually make him uneasy like he was back in like the late 30s, early 40s.
They make him
And
angry, bro.
yeah, threatened and once again feels like these things are here to take over humanity. But Phil's given the opportunity to write for the paper, so he's asked to write about a sculpture exhibit as a kind of like a trial for whether or not they would, greenlight him for writing the book that he wants to publish. And in addition to that, it also functions as like a second mission because there's a gal named Masters that may be connected to the Fantastic Four. So the piece is a hit. He gets another writing promotion and something pretty cool happens. There's this moment where Reed Richards and Susan Storm get married, and he gets the opportunity to take pictures and write that as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to mention how one, Alex Ross Iceman just looks hilarious. And two, everybody just cornered all of them and was acting real rowdy, like they're just rallying a little bit. And
Little rally.
Phil just a little bit of rallying and Phil's like got a like real affection for like bricks because not only did he get bricked in the face but he chucks a brick at Iceman.
What was up with that?
I don't know, dude. He like they took our jobs. He just found a brick, I guess. He's just like, yeah, let's just chuck it at the mutants. Like, way to be racist, bro. What the
Yeah, he
hell?
finally participates in it for the first time, but as he
For
grows
no
older,
reason.
he becomes like a good guy and everything. But I don't know, maybe he just wanted
somebody else to feel his pain.
Yeah, damn, dude, that was deep. Well, I'm gonna go through, and I mean, there's so many things that happen over the course of this. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of little bit of cameos and stuff like that. Like the atmosphere around superheroes kind of turns more into like a paparazzi thing, an obsession around the Reed and Sue marriage. You know, the engagement and everything. Like people are gossiping about her getting down with Namor. Everyone in the celebrity universe is showing up like it's the red carpet because you know Tony Stark's there. You can even see Matt Murdock. Real Kardashian type shit. And then there was a Stiltman sighting. I wanted to make note of that. And then you know, it kind of comes full circle how we were discussing mutants earlier, and how Phil would love to throw bricks at all of them. But ultimately, his daughters were harboring a alien-looking mutant girl in the basement the whole time and feeding her table scraps like a dog. And no one checked to see what they were feeding in the basement, which was weird. But Phil just felt really bad for the little girl mutant, and he started to kind of come around on him after, you know, she was very polite and kind of asked him for help, or, you know, was like, "Oh, I don't mean to be a burden, sir." And he's like, starts tearing up, and he's like, "It's all right." And all of a sudden, mutants are cool in his book. Thought the dude was going to dismantle his house so he could have enough bricks to throw at her, but then he changed up at the last minute. And
Imagine like Dobby from Harry Potter, and that's what
yeah,
changes his mind on the whole entire thing. Well,
bro, I hated Dobby.
there's this like city emergency, and that's when he finds out. It's right before the Fantastic Four wedding. Like these Sentinels are coming out of nowhere looking to like kill these mutants, and he's like, I have one at my house.
Shit, I got one of those.
Yeah. And
I'm
everyone's
gonna
out
blow up
rallying.
Doris.
And he tries to beat the Sentinels to his house, which I don't know how that would even be possible.
Or matter.
Yeah.
They can kill Wolverine, it could kill you, Phil.
But the mutant is gone before he gets there. The whole family's really sad about it. But he wonders, you know, like out of all the nights, like this was kind of like the worst night to leave the house. But he's also kind of glad too, because if like his neighbors were to have found out that Dobby was living in his basement, might have lost another eye. I don't know.
No. It's the origin story for Destiny.
Yeah.
but
Good one.
boom, bazinga. But yeah, I mean, he was gonna ask the X-Men for help too, because he didn't know what to do. He actually wanted to do the right thing, but he got nervous because he didn't want them to remember him after he chucked a brick at him. So ultimately he just, like, I don't know what he was gonna do if the mutant didn't just leave on its own. But, you know, ultimately they're all sad about it, but, you know, they're kind of heartwarmed. But you know, after that, Reed and Sue are getting married. I'd like to note they got married in a church, and everyone's in costume for the most part. I didn't know that the Richards were very religious. But you know, Phil is surprised no one attacked, seeing as how basically every superhero was under one roof. But it went off without a hitch, and you know, everyone had a great time. And then well, that came before that. I kind of just skipped back. I, you know, lost where I was. But yeah, that's really how it it really ends. Everyone's just kind of like, "Oh shit, she probably did." And that's just how it ends. Everyone's just like trying to tell themselves that, you know, Maggie, who is the mutant girl, is she's fine probably, or, you know, probably not. You know, and
Who's
he's
to
just trying
say?
to reassure his daughter. He's like,
And
yeah,
who is to
yeah.
say? Because I was thinking as like the series was concluding at the end of the fourth issue that she would make like another appearance and we would know if she was okay or not. But Sentinels must have got her because she does not come back after leaving the house. There's no mention of her ever again.
I don't mean to do this to you, Joe, but your answer is on the cover of book 3.
Was Silver Surfer?
Oops, the cover of book 2 then, the issue we read. Angels carrying her away.
Oh,
I mean, that's what I mean. I kept expecting it in the story too, but then I went back and I looked at the cover. I was like, oh, there she is.
dang. Well, I just
Yeah,
learned something.
learn his own today. But that's book. We're heading into book 3. And basically the whole thing is that, you know, Tony Stark is buying respect and attention, and Phil has to basically write an article about that. And during that whole process, Stark's PR people just keep trying to buy his respect and attention from Phil, and Phil's like, leave me alone. But this is where we start to see Phil and Doris not having an awesome romance like they did in 1939, because she calls and she's like, Phil, and he just is like, tell her I'm gonna be late again. And it's just like a common occurrence at this point. But that starts to play into things too as the book goes on. But he's kind of thinking his book's gonna tank at this point. He doesn't feel very confident in himself finishing the Marvels book. The Stark people are really trying to win him over. I mean, Tony is getting hammered by the government and media. They're like, this guy's a menace. He sucks. So he's going on. That's like a smaller subplot. I feel like it doesn't really do a lot in the grand scheme of this book, since Iron Man's never really that.
Yeah, I think it's just supposed to add to like his stress because he's trying to put out this book, but like everybody's turned on not only mutants but all the
Superheroes in
Marvels.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And shortly after that too, the sky turns to flames.
Ugh.
Yeah, and we get to witness a sweet brawl between Galactus and the Fantastic Four. There's actually a panel where the thing starts trying to destroy something off the top of a building, and I remember that scene in the Galactus run that we read and reviewed, and was wondering if that was like homage to that storyline, considering it was pretty similar that way.
Oh, it was. But yeah, he gets walloped with that like antenna thing on top of the Baxter building.
Yep.
And meanwhile, during all this, Phil's walking home. It's like the homeboy finally has a sense of peace during the end of the world type chaos. But the kicker is, and one of the most like traumatic things you probably have to deal with living in the Marvel universe is as soon as he gets home and he's finally at peace with potentially the end of the world, his priorities, it just ends. They just come over the news and they're just like, yeah, the Fantastic Four pointed a device at it and it went away. And then everyone's like, what the hell? Because everyone's like repenting and, making up for all the terrible things they did, but then they didn't actually die. So now everyone's like, what? And then they turn angry and they just hate the heroes even more, even though they do a bunch of good stuff for them. Because even the Fantastic Four get dirt on their name after that. They're like, oh, it's probably a hoax, which I think was written by J. Jonah Jameson, which is hilarious. He just stays grinding, bro. He hates Spider-Man. He does.
The Fantastic
Hater of the
Four.
year.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
Yeah,
I don't care, dude. You just saved my ass. You suck.
And it's not enough for people. But it does take us into this very last issue, book 4. Phil's book dropped and it's heat. It's pressure.
Gas.
It's a success, which pushes Phil even further down the rabbit hole as his new mission is to clear Spider-Man's name because it's associated with the death of Captain Stacy. He figures this will tip the scales back closer to the middle, kind of how things were in like the early 60s when some of these Marvels were being idolized. And he talks to everyone he can think of, including like Dr. Ock, Gwen Stacy herself. And speaking of which, I love how this story also injects itself into the death of Gwen Stacy, which we've already read and reviewed too. But it's cool to see all these like classic stories, but told from the perspective of Phil, the photographer.
Yeah, dude, Bernard Phil was running all around just snapping pics.
It's my middle name, by the way.
we didn't have to pull the curtain back on that one, but there you go.
But you probably weren't wondering.
If you don't know, now you know. But this whole time, Phil's kind of getting, well, obviously he's getting older. A lot of shit's happening. And he kind of can't fathom that the Marvels keep being insulted, like in a way. He's like, they do everything for us. They save the world. They save us like countless times, but yet we still talk crap about them whenever we have a chance. And, they go on like a little vacation, I believe, and he's just chilling for once, which he never does. And Doris comes back and she's like, Galactus came back, but the Fantastic Four handled it. And Reed Richards let everyone know that it was fine in our minds. And he's just like, what? And, it's just like, that's the type of stuff you just got to deal with on a almost daily basis, probably. That's got to be pretty freaky. But, Doris is talking about wanting to move to Florida finally, respect. That's like the Midwest dream, retire in Florida. And Phil's not really worried so much about that. He just kind of wants people to respect the Marvels. But as you mentioned, he's just trying to clear Spider-Man's story. I mean, he even starts interviewing J. Jonah Jameson about he kind of tries to roast him. He's like, wow, how do you keep calling him a coward, if he doesn't do anything? But then when he does something, how you call him a criminal? And he kind of gives it to J. Jonah Jameson. He's like, get the hell out of here. He doesn't really have much to exonerate Spider-Man. He can't really clear his name. And also he had a cool little meeting with Luke Cage, who has cool business cards, by the way. I thought that was pretty neat. But While he's in the midst of trying to clear Spider-Man's name, he does go and talk to some old lady after he talks to J. Jonah Jameson. Well, prior to talking to J. Jonah Jameson, she also hates Spider-Man the same way he does. And, the public sentiment is seeming to work, through the media that people don't like Spider-Man. But when he goes and talks to the cops are like, no, he's cool. Captain Stacy loved that guy. Like, we just kind of want a statement. We don't want him for murder. So even they didn't think he was actually, it's all a fabrication by like public opinion, but he's trying to get other regular work, even though he's working on, what's more important to him. Barney offers him a 3 times a week column if he can shoot the Thunderverse Thing event at Shea Stadium, which he kind of accepts. He has his assistant kind of do it instead for him because he's more important in, talking to Dr. Puss to see if he's going to confirm or deny messing up Captain Stacy and chucking that chimney on him. But, Dr. Puss is a smug fella and he says, I'm not going to confirm or deny shit. And then Phil's like, well, okay, well, I can't really do much with that. So then he becomes friends with Gwen Stacy, just hanging out with teenagers. And then she's gonna give Phil her dad's notebook, and he's like, "Oh, that would rule." And he's living a good life. And then when he goes to get it, he sees the Green Gobbler taking her away, and he's like, "Oh shit!" And
it was
he
just
witnesses
like
the
it
iconic
was.
moments.
Yeah, it was just like it was like in the actual story that we read, like Green Goblin just shooting right out the window, and we see, her drop from the bridge and Spider-Man shoot his web to try to save her. And unfortunately, Phil has to see Spider-Man kill Gwen Stacy right in front of him, even though like Phil knows that Spider-Man didn't mean to do it either. And it's cool to know that somebody other than Spider-Man knows, because like all these stories never included Phil, but today they do.
Right. And, he's bummed as hell about that, obviously, since he got to know her. And it's more so the fact that the world just kind of kept it moving. The world kept spinning. Even Doris, didn't really give a shit. It's just kind of like one of those things you hear on the news, like when someone passed, you don't think much of it. You're like, oh, it's kind of sad. And then you just go about your day. But it really stuck with him. And then he kind of had a self-discussion, says he's going to end up retiring, gave all of his stuff to Marcia. And he's like, well, here you go. Snap a pic of the family. And his daughters aren't there, so he takes a picture with the paper boy, who is Danny Ketch, the second, well, technically third, if you're counting the Western one, but one of the Ghost Riders as a young boy, and he gets in the picture. He's like, look, a nice, normal, ordinary boy, and it's the future Ghost Rider, so I'm sure he loves that. And so I mean, that's the end of the book, honestly. So it's kind of a full, circle thing, going through Phil's life and witnessing all the classic things that we love about Marvel Comics through a different perspective. With that said, I think it's time for ratings. Joe, where you at?
I'm gonna give it 9 out of 10. This was way better than I thought it was. I never thought I would enjoy it as much as I did. Never saw Human Torch in the light of Frankenstein's monster, so the portrayal of that character kind of won me over in the beginning of the book. It's probably just the art, but this story did remind me of Kingdom Come, but it's low-key better than Kingdom Come. It's also a cool way to do a retelling of the history of the Marvel universe, but from the perspective of like a real journalist. So I thought that was pretty cool too. I also like that the narrator was a photographer because it's such a visual medium, and some of the panels almost looked like pictures to me. So I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but it blended really nicely, I guess, with the whole medium in particular. My question is, why did they do my man dirty and make him lose an eyeball? But this is definitely one of my favorite interpretations of like a whole connected universe for Marvel. I love the way that the Fantastic Four was portrayed in like juxtaposition to the mutants. Like everything was so realistic, and like the way that everything coexisted with humans. Much prefer stories like this as opposed to like galactic world-ending events. And I would say that's probably my recap. Love the art. Definitely amazing read, and would highly recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10. That's very high praise out of me. But like I said, I'm a big Alex Ross guy. I don't know what it is. Lizard brain connection there. Art's sick. Silver Age and Inspo sick. You could tell there's a lot of care and detail put into the work, especially if you have the digital reader that we have. You can read the references in the back. It has a list of all the Silver Age issues and Golden Age issues it referenced, as well as like an explanation between how he got lighting, models, stuff like that to do the art, which I thought was very impressive. Says it actually took him over a year to complete just these issues. So I thought that was very impressive. The writing was very good. I too agree. I like it way more than Kingdom Come, even though I think Kingdom Come is awesome. I just think it's the better work, and it actually did come first. So it kind of leads in. Like I guess that makes sense. But I would highly recommend, especially if you're a Marvel fan. I would probably put it as must read. I don't think everyone will say so, but I say so for Marvel fans. CBJ approved on that one since we both have a pretty high score on that. But if you disagree with our rankings, if you agree with us, let us know on CBJ Pod on Instagram. That's our main hub there. We just recently did a giveaway, so thank you to all who participated. Don't worry, in the future we will most likely have more, I can assure you. Rate, review, subscribe, any of that you can do if you would like to. It does help feed the algorithm, and it would help any podcast that you do listen to. With that, we'll hit you with what we're doing next time. Joe, you want to let them know?
Yes. So we're going to go back to a topic after reading this. We're going to talk about which superpowers we want. And we're also going to do a fantasy draft of superpowers. So stay tuned. I'm definitely looking forward to that.
As am I. And thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you, guys.